All right, welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. You guys wanted to know more about what's happening with the legal cases against former President Trump, specifically with special counsel Jack Smith. Well, we've got two articles here, one from Forbes and another from The Hill. And let me tell you, these articles do not paint a pretty picture. Trump actually said that he would fire Smith within 2 seconds of taking office if he wins the election. So, wow, right?
Yeah, that's pretty intense.
It is. So let's break down what we've got here and figure out what this could mean for these cases.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how openly Trump is discussing this. Both of these articles highlight his promise to fire Smith immediately upon being reelected. And the language that he uses is really something. I mean, he calls Smith crooked, a scoundrel, a very dishonest man. And this isn't some carefully worded legal statement. This is a full-on attack against the special counsel. And you could argue it's an attack against the judicial process as a whole.
It definitely seems like he's trying to undermine Smith's credibility and maybe even influence public opinion before the election. It's also pretty bold of him to assume he wouldn't face any pushback for firing Smith. Even if the House is controlled by Democrats, he doesn't even seem to consider the possibility of impeachment.
Right, and that raises the question of where does this confidence come from? Is it a miscalculation on his part? Or is there some sort of legal basis for his belief that he can take this action without facing any consequences? That's something we'll need to explore as we break down these cases.
For sure, for sure. Speaking of exploring further, let's get into who Jack Smith is and what exactly he's doing. These articles mention that he's leading not one, but two federal criminal cases against Trump.
That's right. And these aren't just any cases. One focuses on Trump's alleged attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 election, which is, incredibly sensitive territory. And the other one centers around Trump's handling of classified documents after he left office, which is also a major issue.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also important to remember that Smith wasn't just randomly assigned to these cases. Attorney General Merrick Garland specifically appointed him back in November of 2022 to oversee these investigations, which I think really shows just how seriously the Justice Department is taking these allegations.
Absolutely. Appointing a special counsel is not something that is done lightly. It really highlights the significance and the sensitivity of these investigations, and it signifies that the Justice Department felt that these cases needed a level of independence, a level of separation from the usual channels.
Okay, so let's delve into the specifics of each case then. Let's start with the documents case. Things took a rather interesting turn in this one when Judge Aileen Cannon, who was appointed by Trump, dismissed the case, leading Trump to praise her as brilliant. But Smith isn't letting that stop him. He's appealing Cannon's ruling.
Right, and this is where it gets really interesting. Cannon's decision to dismiss the case raised a lot of eyebrows, a lot of questions. And Smith's appeal is setting us up for a potential legal battle. The outcome of this appeal could have huge ramifications, not just for the documents case itself, but also for the broader question of judicial independence. It makes you think, how much does it matter that the judge was appointed by the very person whose case she's presiding over? I mean, that's a question that's going to keep coming up as this moves forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot riding on that appeal. So let's move on to the 2020 election case, which seems even more serious.
It is. The charges in this case are substantial. Trump is facing accusations of conspiracy to defraud the U.S. and of obstructing the certification of electoral votes on January 6th, 2021. I mean, these are very serious allegations that strike at the heart of our democratic process.
They do. And Smith seems to be taking a very specific approach here. He's arguing that Trump's actions were those of a private citizen and not a president. So I'm guessing that this is a strategic move to avoid any claims of presidential immunity. Can you explain what that means and how it might impact the case?
Yeah, you're right on the money. This is a very clever legal tactic that could have a big impact. Presidential immunity is this complex legal doctrine that shields presidents from certain lawsuits while they're in office. By framing Trump's actions as those of a private citizen, Smith is trying to preempt any defense based on that doctrine. So this is definitely a strategy to keep an eye on.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating legal chess match here, and I can't wait to see how this strategy plays out in court. But let's just step back for a second and address the elephant in the room. What happens to all of this if Trump wins the 2024 election?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Based on his statements and past behavior, it's not hard to imagine him actually following through with his promise to fire Smith.
It's definitely within the realm of possibility. And if we sort of connect that to the bigger picture here, a potential Trump victory could have a chilling effect on the pursuit of justice and accountability. I mean, just imagine the precedent it would set. if a president could simply shut down investigations into their own conduct just by firing the people in charge.
That's right. It's a pretty unsettling thought.
It is.
And it's not just about these particular cases against Trump either. It raises some fundamental questions about the rule of law and the balance of power in a democracy. I mean, if a president can just fire anyone who's investigating them, then what's to stop them from abusing their power?
Exactly.
That kind of scenario could really damage public trust in the justice system. No matter what your political leanings are, it suggests that those in power are above the law. And that's a dangerous precedent to set.
For sure. And we also can't forget about the potential impact on the Justice Department itself. Can you imagine the turmoil and demoralization within the ranks if these cases were just suddenly dropped under a new Trump administration?
It would send shockwaves through the DOJ. And it's not just about these two cases. It's about the message that it would send to every prosecutor and investigator. It could create this climate of fear and hesitation, making it much harder to pursue these sorts of sensitive investigations in the future, especially ones that involve these high-ranking officials.
So we've got these two high-stakes legal battles that are unfolding, and hanging over everything is this very real possibility that the 2024 election could just completely change their trajectory.
Yeah, I mean, it really underscores how fragile our democratic institutions are and how crucial it is to uphold the rule of law, even when you're facing this immense political pressure.
So up to this point, we've really unpacked a lot. We've unpacked Trump's, bold statements. We've dived into the details of the two cases that are against him. And we've explored how a potential Trump victory could impact these investigations. What are some of the other key takeaways that we should be highlighting here for our listeners?
Well, I think we've seen how strategic legal maneuvering is really shaping these cases. So on one side, you have Trump's team. And they're likely preparing to leverage every legal avenue that's available, including, potential claims of presidential immunity. And then on the other side, you have Jack Smith. And he's very carefully crafting his approach, especially in the 2020 election case, to try and preempt those defenses.
Right. And all of this is happening against the backdrop of a deeply divided political landscape. It seems like every move in these cases is scrutinized and interpreted through this partisan lens, which makes it even harder to discern fact from spin.
Yeah, that's a key point. These cases aren't just legal battles, they're political battles. And they're playing out in the court of public opinion as much as they are in the actual courtroom.
Yeah, it's like this high-stakes reality show, but with the future of our democracy hanging in the balance. So what does all of this tell us about the state of American politics and the challenges that are facing our legal system?
Well, it highlights how vulnerable our institutions are to political pressure, and how crucial it is for the justice system to maintain its independence. These cases are really a stress test for our democracy, and the outcome could have these long-lasting consequences.
Okay, that's a lot to process. I'm sure our listener is feeling the weight of all of this. But before we wrap things up here, I want to go back to something that you said earlier about judicial independence. Can you break that down a little bit more, like what that means and why it's so important in these cases?
Sure. So judicial independence basically means that judges should be free to make decisions based on the law and the facts of the case, without being influenced by any outside pressures, especially political ones. It's a cornerstone of a fair and impartial justice system.
So in these cases, with so much political baggage and intense scrutiny, it's even more crucial, right?
Absolutely. It's essential that the judges presiding over these cases are seen as impartial and unbiased. Any hint of favoritism or political influence could really undermine public trust in the entire process.
So in a situation like this, where you have a judge, Aileen Cannon, who was appointed by Trump, presiding over one of his cases, does that raise concerns about potential bias?
It's a legitimate concern, and it's something that legal experts and commentators are debating fiercely. Some argue that her ruling in the documents case, dismissing it in favor of Trump, is evidence of bias. Others say that she was simply following the letter of the law.
Yeah, it's a tough call, and it's definitely something we'll need to keep a close eye on. But it raises this broader question of how do we ensure judicial independence, especially in these politically charged cases like these.
It's one of the biggest challenges facing our legal system today, and it's a conversation that we need to be having as a society.
Yeah, for sure. We've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the possibility of Trump firing Smith, the potential for a constitutional crisis, and the importance of judicial independence. All pretty heavy stuff. So, what does all of this mean for our listener who's trying to make sense of it all?
It's a lot to digest, but it's crucial information for anyone who cares about the future of our democracy. These cases are about more than just legal technicalities. They're about these fundamental principles of justice. accountability, and the rule of law.
Yeah, it really is a pivotal moment in our history.
It is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways that we want to leave our listener with?
Well, I think we've seen how Trump's vow to fire Smith has really set the stage for this potential showdown between executive power and judicial independence. And it raises the question, can a president truly operate above the law?
Right, and we've also explored the implications of these cases, not just for Trump himself, but for the future of our democracy as a whole. What happens if a president can just shut down investigations into their own conduct? What does that say about accountability and the rule of law?
These are questions that I think every American should be grappling with, regardless of their political beliefs. These cases force us to examine the resilience of our institutions and the importance of an engaged citizenry.
Absolutely. So let's bring it all home. We've covered Trump's statements, we've delved into the cases against him, analyzed the potential impact of a Trump victory, and we even discussed the significance of judicial independence. So what's the one big question that should be lingering in our listeners' mind right now?
The one that keeps me up at night is this. What does Trump's promise to fire Smith actually tell us about his views on the justice system? And how might this impact public trust in the legal process, no matter who wins the election?
That is a powerful question, and one that definitely deserves careful consideration. It highlights the stakes of this election and the potential consequences for the very foundation of our democracy.
And remember, a healthy democracy relies on informed citizens who are willing to engage in these tough conversations. So keep asking questions, stay informed, and participate in the process.
Well said. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope you found it insightful, informative, and maybe even a little bit unsettling. But until next time, keep diving deep.